Welcome to viewers around the world from Hong Kong on this, its last day of rule by Britain. It's already 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, and how you view today's ceremonies depends on how you describe today's events. For Britain, it's a handover of power in a territory that it has held for 156 years. For China, it's the return of power over a territory that it was forced to hand over under duress and has resented ever since. For Britain, it's an event of regret and anxiety mingled with pride. For China, it's an event of deepest pride that a century of humiliation by the colonialists is ending, that the sacred mission of getting Hong Kong back will be fulfilled, and that China is one step closer to restoring its full national unity. At all events, the transfer of power is taking place by agreement, one struck in the memorable words of a British diplomat between the inscrutable Chinese and the unfathomable barbarians. In a few minutes, this historic transfer starts with the first of three events, none of them merely ceremonial, each shifting Hong Kong gently but emphatically from a British world of rule by law to a Chinese world of rule by the Communist Party. Guarantees there are in plenty, but that is what today's events are about. And the ceremonies will start in Government House, seat of the Queen's surrogate, no less, the Governor, Chris Patton. So let's join Brian Hanrahan there.
John, at the moment we're waiting on the lawn outside Government House for Mr. Patton to come out for the last time and leave what has always been the seat and the symbol of British power here in Hong Kong. At the moment, he and his family are inside taking a personal farewell of each of the 130 members of staff or so who've cared for them during their 5 years here in Hong Kong. And we're told that it's likely to be a very tearful occasion. It's certainly been a very slow one. And only after they have recovered themselves from that are they going to come out for the final formal ceremony of farewell. Government House was one of the first public buildings in Hong Kong. It stood on a little outcrop overlooking the bustling and smelly city that was rapidly developing along the waterfront. From up here, the governors made wars and ended them, received Chinese envoys, directed British trade, and presided over the far-flung outpost of the British Empire. Even then, it grew prodigiously as many Chinese, while resenting British control, fled here to take refuge from wars and revolution that consumed China for more than a century. The original house was almost entirely rebuilt by the Japanese when they occupied Hong Kong during World War II. They're responsible for the distinctive tower and the tiled roofs, completely out of keeping with its British past. Now, of course, it's dwarfed by the high-rise buildings which block it off completely from the waterfront, most of them banks, competing to see which can get closest to heaven. It's been a frantically busy few weeks here with balls and receptions to mark the end of British rule. And over this last weekend, Prince Charles has been here giving the last honours to those who served the British Crown. It was the last chance to see Government House as it would have been in the heyday of empire. Prince Charles representing the sovereign. The ballroom, once the largest assembly room in the city, packed with loyal subjects come to receive their honours. But unusually today, it was not the governor, but Prince Charles who was the Queen's plenipotentiary. There was a knighthood for Donald Zhang, the financial secretary, who will continue to run Hong Kong's finances under the new administration. And the Order of the British Empire in all its many ranks for those still ready to receive it. A complete day of investing. But by now the royal coat of arms has been taken down and packed away. Government House is ready for its new owners. The chief doorman, Jack Chack, who received the governor's commendation for Prince Charles, is waiting to open the door for the last time. But there's been no twilight of empire. Government House celebrated the Queen's birthday this weekend in exactly the same manner as always. Only the unusually exalted guest list spoke of the occasion's importance. was an unabashed display from the departing empire.
And an hour after the doors close on Government House, the scene shifts to the edge of Victoria Harbour, to the former British Naval Base, East Tamar, where a huge crowd will watch the British farewell, a joint civilian and military spectacular, and it's the heart of the whole handover. Eric Robertson is waiting there to set the scene. Eric.
Well, this place on the Hong Kong waterfront was, until not so long ago, a working naval dockyard. HMS Tamar, which for 100 years serviced the sleek cruisers and towering men of war of the Royal Navy's China Squadron. Now, though, it's been transformed into a magnificent parade square. Its backdrop, Her Majesty's Royal Yacht Britannia, and then across the bustling water of Victoria Harbour, the skyline and the distant hills of Kowloon and the New Territories. The setting in a couple of hours' time for a spectacular military and civilian pageant being rehearsed now to mark the British farewell. It's an event in which the Chinese culture of Hong Kong and the British culture of Hong Kong will overlap. Dragon dancers and drummers sharing centre stage with the massed bands and pipes and drums of the British Armed Services. There'll be some 2,500 performers in all, in front of an audience of 10,000, an audience of 120 million watching it around the world. And at the heart of the event will be the lowering of the British and the Hong Kong flags in the presence of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. It promises to be a poignant and majestic event. I hope the weather holds, and I look forward to you joining us for it.
Said we will finally, half an hour before midnight in Hong Kong, that's in a little over 7 hours' time. The scene changes to Hong Kong's extraordinary new convention centre, completed just in time for today's ceremonies, and at almost £400 million sterling, the most tangible evidence needed of the confidence that so many feel. And here, the Prince of Wales, the Prime Minister, and the Governor will lead the British delegation. On the Chinese side, the highest level delegation possible. President Jiang Zemin, Premier Li Peng, and Vice Premier Chen Chi-chen. And here, the 99-year lease on the greater part of Hong Kong, the New Territories, expires, and sovereignty over Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, once thought to be perpetual, will be returned. But in a few minutes, events start at Government House itself, where British colonial life, with its formalities and investitures, its Queen's birthday parties, proclaimed whose authority held sway. But it said something else too, that Hong Kong was ruled by law, that the civil service was impartial and honest, and that the monarch might be remote, but she was just. And Hong Kong is what it is today in good measure because of those messages. In a few minutes' time, the Governor's formal farewell will start, so let's go back to Brian Hanrahan at Government House.
Governor, have you been able to gauge your own personal mood underneath this public fuss that's going on?
I'm churning about inside like nobody's business. I've been through several incredibly emotional occasions in the last few days, noticeably yesterday again when I went to a mass in our parish church for the last time, and there was a tremendous presentation and speeches and applause and so on. Today we're saying goodbye to our closest staff, who've looked after us very well, and it's all pretty draining. There's only so much handkerchief space one's got.
And you're feeling that. You're not a public figure who's out of all this. I mean, these are real people that you actually are finding it hard to say goodbye to.
These are friends of ours.
More than in the past?
These are friends of ours who've shared our lives and looked after us with fantastic loyalty and decency over the last few years, and we're going to miss them like anything. And I think that I think they'll miss us.
Do you think you've kind of defeated history here? That you have made a personal difference? That there's something you've done that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't come here?
I think it's quite dangerous when politicians, when public figures start sort of awarding themselves history's verdict. But I do think that we've managed the last 5 years pretty well, and that the way we've done things has enabled us to depart from Hong Kong with some self-respect.
But is that you? Would that have happened whoever came here, or did you actually make it?
Well, I think I perhaps put more emphasis on the promises that we'd made to people back in the 80s about their freedoms and about their values. I didn't regard those things as just diplomatic speak which we could hollow out. I actually took them seriously, as the people in Hong Kong did.
And will you...
And I think that there is now a more open society in Hong Kong, and there is a much more self-confident commitment to the sort of things that have made Hong Kong special.
And will you ask yourself in the years to come about your personal responsibility when it goes on? Will you feel that you have to answer for what happens here?
Oh yes, I will. But I think that a lot of the questions that are asked in the future won't be about the last 5 years. They'll be about Britain's discharge of its responsibilities over a longer period. And I don't myself think that the criticisms that are going to be directed at us are going to be that we tried to do too much to defend democracy and to defend civil liberties at this stage in the transition. I think if there are questions, they're likely to be about whether we did enough altogether.
You're still a public figure here, in the middle of interviews, you've got political meetings, you're going to stay like that until you get on Britannia and you go away. When will you let go, and what will you think?
Well, the programme has me as H.E. the Governor with HRH the Prince of Wales until midnight, and then I become Mr. Patton very quickly. And do you know something? I'm quite looking forward to being Mr. Patton. Yes. Mr. Patton seems to me to be quite a good thing to be.
Mr. Patton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks very much.
The Governor's final informal words recorded a little earlier today, talking to Brian Hanrahan. More formal words, of course, coming up. Now let's go live to Government House and back to Brian Hanrahan. Brian.
The Governor's standard flying here over Government House follows him everywhere in Hong Kong. It's his symbol, his authority. When it moves, he moves. It flies in his car, and it flies over each building where he spends the night. But this afternoon, that flag will be pulled down for the last time and presented to Mr. Patton to take home with him. Because from tomorrow, Hong Kong will have a new flag, new symbols, to go with a new government and a new future. And the most difficult aspect will be for the people who are lining up outside Government House to watch the final farewell ceremony. This is very formal, but inside it's been informal, and the people have been coming out with tears in their eyes after they've shaken hands with the Governor and wished him goodbye, because they're the people who have a personal loyalty to the Governor, and they, more than anybody else, will feel that he is departing. But he has built up, you can see them there, standing on the lawn outside. These are the members of his personal office, the office staff. They've more or less doubled in number since he came here, because Mr. Patton has opened up Government House and himself in a way that no other governor ever did, and he's built up a great personal loyalty amongst the people of Hong Kong. In the last week, the opinion polls have been showing him riding very high. Something like 70% of the people say they're very satisfied with the way that he's conducted himself in office. And Mr. Tung Chee-hwa, who's going to take over from him as chief executive, has taken a dip, and now will have to try and build up his popularity to that kind of level. Government House has been here for a century and a half. During that time, it's seen the fortunes of Hong Kong come and go. It's seen royalty come and go. Those lions that you see on either side were placed here for a royal visit in the 1950s. And at any moment, Mr. Patton and his family are expected to come out and join this farewell ceremony. Jack Shack, the doorman, who got his governor's commendation earlier, opens the door. And now the family start to emerge. First the three daughters, who've been social icons here in Hong Kong, drew a great deal of attention when they first arrived, looking much more demure, the three of them, than when they first arrived. And here, Mr. Patton and his wife Lavender, looking sad. As the Queen's representative, Mr. Patton ranks a royal salute, which will be given to him by the police band, and the Guard of Honour. And the ceremony will begin with a display by the drill instructors from the Royal Hong Kong Police Training School. And indeed the Guard of Honour is also from the Royal Hong Kong Police Training School, and they will be inspected next month by Mr. Tung Chi Hua in his capacity as Chief Executive when they pass out. And this is a regular display put on by the police here in Hong Kong. The rifles, for those of you who've noticed, are Lee Enfield 303s from World War I vintage. The Hong Kong police are the only people who have them, but although they can fire, these are only used for ceremonial purposes. Now Mr. Patton is going to say a few words to each of his aide-de-camps, the assistants that he has here in Hong Kong from the various uniformed services which support the Crown. They will represent the staff and they will take their farewell out here. There are Mr. Patton's daughters, and he's going to work down the line. Beginning with Captain Lindsay Gowland from the Army. These are the people who, when he visits any of the regiments or units which are stationed here in Hong Kong, they will accompany Mr. Patton and guide him through the work that they do. and there are 15 of them because Hong Kong has an unusual structure. It doesn't have a Navy, Army and Air Force of itself. This is Captain Wong of the Government Flying Service, which does the work which effectively the RAF would do elsewhere, search and rescue, flying Mr. Patton himself around the colony when he makes visits as a governor, and generally filling in. And so they don't have a normal structure of the kind that we have in Britain, but they have this collection of other services. This is Superintendent Yeung of the Prison Department, or the Correctional Services Department, to give it its full name. They have the task of looking after not just the prisons, but of course the Vietnamese refugee camps, where they had at one time 50,000 people waiting to go back to Vietnam. They're mainly cleared away now because the Chinese insisted that before the colony could go back to British rule, they had to be cleared of Vietnamese immigrants. Flight Lieutenant Barnstable of the Royal Air Force. There's hardly any of the Royal Air Force left here. The last Wessex squadron was sold off to Uruguay earlier this month. There's the Customs and Exercise man. There has been, these are the people who will be responsible one way or another for maintaining order and good discipline here in Hong Kong. The auxiliary medical services are next. And that is why the argument goes that there is no need for the People's Liberation Army to arrive here in force, as they're planning to do tomorrow morning. The structure of Hong Kong has always got by without needing a large-scale amount of support from the British forces, who are here as a garrison purely for emergency purposes, and indeed very few of them left now. But the PLA are coming tomorrow morning. 4,500 of them will come across the border with their armoured cars and move down into Hong Kong, causing some alarm, and it's already aroused a great deal of comment about the manner in which they're emerging. There has been a considerable apprehension here about the arrival of the PLA, because it's felt that they, of all people, are the ones who may start to break through the agreement if they have a presence here. And there is a fear that, however well-intentioned, that is what will let the agreement start to erode, if anything is going to do so. But we have to wait and see. And the assumption at the moment is that the Chinese are coming in good faith, and the people here are anxious to see how that works out. Mrs. Patton, who's a barrister and has been involved in a great deal of charity work here in Hong Kong, patron of more than 68 charities. And this is the regional commander of the civil aid services. They're a kind of civil defense, and they take care of things like typhoons, or indeed sometimes big public events. The Gurkhas, for example, used to police one of the big marathon walks here, the MacLehose Walk, every year. They're gone now, so the civil aid services have taken over controlling that. An example of the way in which Hong Kong's patchwork of forces has built up. For them, of course, this is a change of allegiance, which is very difficult because they have had to work through a personal allegiance to the Crown and the Governor, and now that allegiance has to switch in a trice overnight. In fact, some of them will actually pull their ER and insignia and their crowns off their shoulders at midnight tonight and replace them with the emblems of the new Special Administrative Region. He ignores the man on the end because that's his personal aide-de-camp, Lance Brown, who also belongs to the Hong Kong Police, and he will be retiring at midnight tonight and leaving with Mr. Patton on the Royal Yacht Britannia. And now the Governor's standard will be lowered for the last time. This is Highland Cathedral, Mr. Patton's favourite tune, or at least the one that's been identified by the bands here as the one that he likes most, and it's played almost everywhere he goes. He's showing the emotion as both the flag and the rain come down on this typical, dull, hot Hong Kong afternoon. We're waiting now for the governor's standard to be brought down. It's being folded exactly according to the British Army drill manual, and it'll be brought down, presented to his aide-de-camp, Superintendent Lance Brown, who will then present it to the governor to take away as a memento of his time here in Hong Kong. And these are his daughters. On the right is Alice, who is the youngest of the three Patton daughters, who's been here in Hong Kong in the school system, has just passed her, or just taken her A-levels. She's waiting to hear the results. Lance Brown will now come forward and present the governor with his standard. And that applause breaking through from people gathered in the road outside to watch this ceremony, peering through the gates. And that is it. There really is nothing more for Mr. Patton to do. The standard has been lowered, his goodbyes are said. There's nothing left to do but to go. And here comes the governor's Rolls-Royce. Bought in 1961, been used by every governor since, and will indeed be used by Mr. Patton's successor, Tung Chi Hua, who will take it over at midnight tonight. As a courtesy, it will drop the governor and the Prince of Wales at the Royal Yacht, and then it will return with the current driver, but without the crown, in order to become the chief executive's official car. Mr. Patton and his wife enter the first car with their aide-de-camp, Lance Brown. You can see in the background his three daughters are getting into the second car, and then they'll be off. The people grouped in the background here, you occasionally see other families of the staff who actually live on the site here at Government House. There are about 36 families, ranging from babes in arms to old grandmothers, who've come out to see this and make this a proper family occasion. And there is one final touch, Chinese touch to this ceremony. As the car leaves, it will not go through the gates. It will go round the central lawn once in a complete circle. That will mean it's been round 3 times, and under Chinese tradition, that says, "We'll be back." I'm not sure what the Chinese will make of that, but it's been done by every governor on his departure, and Mr. Patton is determined that there will be no exception. Here it goes, past the gates and round the centre circle. This tiny British oasis tucked away amid Hong Kong's constantly climbing skyscrapers. And what we're watching here is the last act of empire, not just of Hong Kong. 50 years ago, 800 million people lived under the Union Jack. Tonight, it will be less than 200,000 when Hong Kong and its 6.5 million leave British dominion. Outside, the crowds have been lining up all day to have their photos taken outside this last slice of British nostalgia. And they've been waiting there to cheer Mr. Patton as he goes away, a sign of his popularity. Mr. Patton is away, taking his standard with him. He was a very different governor to his predecessors. They came to govern nations. He came to persuade the people to govern themselves. He got fierce criticism from the Chinese, from the old British hands who ran things here before him. But he's been very popular amongst the people who have to live in Hong Kong, the people that his reforms and his changes have been about. What he made was something of a gambler's throw here, and if you look at it objectively, it does look like he's lost. But we aren't going to know until the next player takes up the dice and takes their turn in the game.
Brian Hanrahan at Government House, and so the 28th and last governor of Hong Kong closes the door and starts switching off the lights of British colonial rule. And the verdict on him and the whole historical experience will come with time. What's clear already is that it's taking place with a degree of stability, continuity and confidence that few would have forecast with certainty only a few years ago. It's also, as you will have observed, taking place in the rain. Some superstitious Chinese will say that heaven is weeping at the end of British rule. Others will say that heaven is wiping away the Patton legacy. In a little over an hour, we go to East Tamar for the British military and civilian farewell ceremonies. And later, there'll be the great symbolic flag lowering and raising in the presence of the British and Chinese delegations. Then the departure of Britannia with the Prince of Wales and the by then ex-governor on board, leaving to its own devices what has been called the busiest, the richest and the most truly extraordinary of all Chinese cities. But Chinese it will undoubtedly be. Join us in an hour's time at 10:40 on BBC One. Until then, goodbye from Hong Kong. Hello and welcome to viewers around the world from Hong Kong as the last hours of Britain's 156-year rule and its governing presence are fast running away. We'll be covering them all for you live here on BBC One. The countdown to the lowering of the Union and the Hong Kong flag started a couple of hours ago when the 28th and last Governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patton, said farewell to Government House. Once the seat of power, in future it will just become a government guest house. The personal farewells between the Governor and his staff had taken place inside the house earlier. Whatever the private feelings, now they were all on parade. The bands played what has become Mr. Patton's personal anthem, Highland Cathedral. For the lowering of the British and Hong Kong flag, there was only one possible accompaniment. The Governor's Rolls-Royce drove round the forecourt 3 times. In Chinese superstition, that means you will return. But for Britain, that was surely only going through the fall. All lang syne, of course. In half an hour's time, the action moves to East Tamar, the former heart of the British military garrison, where the main British ceremony of withdrawal will take place. Let's join Eric Robson there. Eric.
Well, John, through the afternoon here, rain and thunderstorms have raked the site at Tamar. Anxious organisers have been divining the heavens. Is the feng shui, the geomancy of wind and water awry somehow? While at the same time the international guests have been assembling through the storm. Amongst the British politicians already here, Paddy Ashdown, Sir Geoffrey Howe, I saw Michael Heseltine a moment or so ago. They're here to take their places for the pageant which, as darkness falls, will illuminate this corner of Hong Kong. And across the square from us, the Prince of Wales building, where the very last British troops in Hong Kong are preparing for their final parade. Alongside the quay, the escort to the royal yacht, HMS Chatham, which will fire the final royal salute in the colony. And out in the harbour, the ships of the Hong Kong Squadron, which in the small hours of tomorrow morning will accompany the royal yacht on her passage to Manila. The very earliest British settlers here had nothing good to say about the weather. It seems that, at least, hasn't changed.
And here at the Convention Centre is where the transfer of power itself will take place at midnight Hong Kong time. China's President Jiang Zemin will be coming just for a few hours to attend the ceremony, a mark of its enormous importance to China. And amongst the 4,000 guests, there'll be a United Nations of foreign dignitaries to show its significance in world affairs. The ceremony itself will be a rather stark affair, the bare minimum necessary to accomplish the transfer of sovereignty with dignity. And we'll be inside to see Britain's last act in Hong Kong and hear what China has to say once it has taken control.
So in 6 hours from now, it'll all be over. At least Britain's governing role will have ended. Britain's commercial presence, of course, will be as strong as ever. More than 1,000 British companies are here, and Britain is the largest investor in the territory. As formal authority ebbs, business links remain. Indeed, for decades, many British diplomats have thought that that is what should have been happening in any case. So, how did Britain come to be here in the first place? The plain answer is, with a good deal of uncertainty and a decent amount of guilt.
The Chinese have the right to drive us from their coasts on account of our obstinacy in persisting in this infamous and atrocious traffic. I do not know of a war more unjust in its origin, a war more calculated in its progress, to cover this country with permanent disgrace.
William Gladstone's sole voice of protest against the Opium Wars, the event that led to the beginning of Hong Kong. But it was more than that. It was essentially the clash of two civilizations and the clash of the two greatest empires of the 19th century. For 2,000 years, China was the most powerful empire in the Orient. After the defeat of Napoleon, Britain was the greatest power in the West. It was determined to expand, and trade and technological advance brought British merchants to the very doorstep of China. But China regarded all merchants as parasites and all foreigners as barbarians. By imperial order, all traders were banished to Canton in the far southeast corner of the empire, where they were subjected to all kinds of restrictions and humiliations. The Emperor Qianlong summed up the Chinese view: "We possess all things. I set no value on objects strange or ingenious and have no use for your country's manufactures." That is, until opium. The Chinese craved Indian opium as much as the English desired China's tea, and an increasingly valuable trade was pursued on both sides. By the late 1830s, there were 12 million opium addicts in China, despite strict laws forbidding it. Worried about the effect on the population and the outpouring of silver to pay for the foreign mud, the emperor sent the commissioner Lin Zhu to destroy all stocks of opium and ban the trade. War broke out, and the long list of British grievances came to the fore, the fight for free trade being far more important than mere restoration of the opium. Superior firepower and organization quickly secured a British victory. In the peace settlement, the Treaty of Nanjing, the British demanded a piece of land from where they could trade unhindered. That was Hong Kong, to be ceded in perpetuity. A mountainous island sparsely populated with peasant farmers and fishermen, but with one great advantage, a superb deep-water harbour. In London, the imperialist Lord Palmerston, the Foreign Secretary, was less than pleased with the new acquisition, dismissing it as a barren rock with hardly a house upon it. What would he have made of Hong Kong Island today? 1.2 million people packed into just 32 square miles. But within 20 years after gaining Hong Kong, war had resumed. Fearful for the safety of their new free port, Britain looked across the water and occupied the southern tip of the Kowloon Peninsula, thus securing all access to the harbour. And in 1860, after the Convention of Peking, the boundary between the British Empire and China was here. Impossible to believe today, but in 1861, all that was needed was a simple bamboo fence to mark the spot. As the 19th century drew to a close, China got weaker and weaker, and various European powers just picked bits off it like a ripe watermelon. Britain decided to act. The British minister in Peking said to the Chinese foreign minister that Hong Kong wanted to extend its boundaries for defensive purposes beyond the Kowloon Hills. Commissioner Stuart Lockhart and his Chinese counterpart set off to mark the new boundary. But as they proudly posed for photographs and for history, they seemed unconcerned by one small point. Unlike Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, which had been ceded to Britain in perpetuity, the so-called new territories were obtained on a 99-year lease. The expiry date, the 30th of June, 1997. Since then, with 90% of its land leased, the clock has been ticking on the British colony. In the words of the novelist Han Su-yin, a borrowed place living on borrowed time. Today, of course, we're concentrating on the British withdrawal, but the other partner to the handover is just as important. For China, Hong Kong's return is a crucial moment in the restoration of China's dignity, its unity, and the end of a century of humiliation. It's the fulfillment of a dream that all China's rulers, whether communist or non-communist, had had for at least half a century. The wonder is not that the British are handing Hong Kong back, rather that they kept it so long. Let's join Humphrey Hawksley in Tiananmen Square in the Chinese capital. Humphrey, many people, I think, find this idea of unequal treaties a bit hard to understand. Britain got part of Hong Kong in perpetuity, and suddenly we've had to hand it back.
Yes, well, what happened was we paved the way, the British that was, during the colonial times. But what happened to China was that it was salami cut in a way, and at the end of at the beginning of the 20th century, there were the Germans were in the north, the Russians were there, the French, the Japanese were in Shanghai, we were in the south, and even inland along the Yangtze River we were controlling huge parts of great cities. And the Chinese see this in a way as the weakness of the nationalist government. And the Communist Party took over in 1949 and got rid of most of the colonial powers, including the Japanese, but kept us on in Hong Kong.
But it's the idea of the unequal treaty that's so fascinating. They said because it wasn't struck between equal powers, that therefore they had the right to undo it.
Well, that's right. They never recognized it because the British came up with gunboats and threatened to flatten Nanjing, so they signed away Hong Kong. And that has been the line throughout. But when Mao Zedong came to power, he said that one of his aims was to reunify China, which meant Hong Kong, Macau, and eventually Taiwan. And I think this date, although the treaty was unequal, was a convenient time for them to say, all right, let's get it back. Let us uphold this policy that we declared to the Chinese people when we came to power.
Humphrey, thank you very much. The fulfillment of a long-held dream. So everything turns on Beijing's intentions. For 15 years, the negotiations on Hong Kong had been filled with reassuring sounds from Beijing. Advice has ranged from keep on dancing, keep on horse racing, to the explicit promise that what Hong Kong is joining is one country but two systems. The trouble is that the two systems of outlook, beliefs and behavior, one democratic, the other communist, are very far apart. The contrast between Hong Kong's aggressively international outlook and the mainland's inward-looking closed society appears to many to be the main threat to its continued success. The film director Wong Kar-wai is back in Hong Kong. At this year's Cannes Film Festival, he received the Best Director award. But he realizes that time was on his side. Had the movie been released a year later, he might not now be nursing a golden statuette.
As a filmmaker, you can work very freely in Hong Kong because as long as you take the risk yourself and you really want to do the film, you really believe about the topics, then you can do it somehow.
Just before Cannes, the most famous mainland filmmaker, Zhang Yimou, had his passport taken away by the Chinese authorities. Unable to travel, his film was withdrawn.
I think for Zhang Yimou and other filmmakers, the most important thing is if you believe in the film and you just make it. And somehow Zhang Yimou and Zhang Yun, they make the film. If you want to do the film, just do it.
Pro-Chinese sympathizers from Taiwan celebrating Hong Kong's return to the motherland. Taiwan will be next, they say. Hong Kong is just a test case for the greater prize in the future.
We Taiwan people in Hong Kong are so joyous, just like we were in the spring of 1945, when Taiwan was recovered from Japanese occupation. Once the one country, two system formula succeeds here and in Macau, it will be applied to Taiwan.
It was Deng Xiaoping who took the giant step of inventing the concept by which China would end 450 years of foreign occupation and division. For him, one country, two systems was a way of tempting Taiwan back into the Chinese fold. Deng never expected Hong Kong and China to grow more alike. He merely thought that as the People's Republic became more rich and powerful, Hong Kong would want to be part of it. There was no understanding of its way of life or why people felt so strongly about it. Beijing saw it as all based on the chance of making money.
I think they probably understand the economic aspects of how Hong Kong works. There is a general feeling that perhaps Chinese leaders do not fully understand the political side of Hong Kong's autonomy and the need to maintain our lifestyle and our current rights and freedoms. I have to say that I believe myself that Chinese leaders are quite comfortable in leaving the running of Hong Kong to the Chief Executive, Mr. Tong. Since his election, there has been no evidence that I have seen that they are attempting in any way to interfere.
Most Hong Kongers lack a sense of identification with China. Some of it stems from the education system, lack of direct political or civic education, little emphasis on Chinese, and the smartest and the wealthiest know where they want to study, abroad.
Sometimes recognize ourselves as Chinese, especially for the traditional Chinese value. But somehow the people are afraid of the Beijing regime. So the problem is that the people has the confusion between the regime and the nation.
Most of the Hong Kong people, they think that their identity, their Chinese identity, is depend on the recognition of the regime, the communist regime. But in my opinion, I think that your identity is not depends on a recognition regime or not. In my opinion, I just recognize the Chinese culture.
The majority of Hong Kong people prefer what are clearly labelled as Western, not Asian values. Once Hong Kongers perceive themselves as no longer colonial subjects but as Chinese citizens, will their behaviour and opinions change from their present patterns to more Chinese values? Over the last 5 years, most of the argument between Britain and China has been about the nature of the Legislative Council, or LegCo as it's universally called. At midnight, the existing, more or less elected LegCo is dissolved. A new one, appointed by China, takes over. And some of the best known and democratically elected councillors will be excluded. It was their decision not to take part in the new body. So the whole LegCo building will be the scene of protests to mark this transition. And Joy Shan Lam is in the square outside. Joy Shan.
The British flags are about to be lowered for the last time at the Cenotaph. Right here is expected to be the first political flashpoint of the new SAR. The Democratic Party, which has won the elections in '95, has opted not to join the provisional legislature, but they're expected to be here this afternoon and later on tonight. Martin Lee, the party leader, is expected to make a speech on the balcony of the LegCo building to denounce the provisional legislature. Also here is the Frontier, who are expected to march to Mr. Tong's office at around midnight tonight, and that's being led by Emily Lau, an independent legislator, at least until midnight tonight when the provisional legislature takes over. Also expected here is the DAB, the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment of Hong Kong. They are supposed to be singing patriotic songs celebrating the reunification with China. It should be quite interesting to watch what happens here tonight. Back to you, John.
That's what you might call one of the unscheduled events that are taking place in Hong Kong this evening. Over to the scheduled ones over at East Tamar, the specially built arena is filling up. Let's catch up on the scene there again with Eric Robertson. Eric?
Well, despite the weather, which has poured from the peak for most of the afternoon, with tempting clear breaks to lull us all into the next drenching, a great assembly of politicians and diplomats have come here to Tamar to mark the moment of the British farewell. I notice that Mrs. Thatcher, who set the latter-day clock ticking to this moment in 1984, arrived a few moments ago. There are representatives too from many European and Commonwealth countries, from America, Australia, New Zealand, and all the while the band of the Hong Kong police plays manfully on. In a quarter of an hour, 2,500 performers will brave the rain to do the same. We'll bring you the excitement and the emotion of it.
Well, you saw earlier how dwarfed Government House is by the surrounding bank and commercial skyscrapers, and that's a true symbol of the way things have changed. Today, Hong Kong, the world's 8th largest trading economy, soon to be China's greatest international city, is defined by its own efforts, its own achievements, its own success. And as Hong Kong has taken over this process, so the British colonial way of life that started it all has ebbed away into faded prints, personal memories, and the history books. Today, the Anglican St. John's Cathedral is dwarfed by the surrounding skyscrapers. But for most of its 150-year history, it is the island's chief landmark, the place where the great social and religious rituals of colonial life took place. Those who passed through its doors and knelt in its pews recall a different place and a very different life.
There was very little traffic. The means of transport was mostly rickshaws and sedan chairs, and there were points along the road where they would gather, and so people could go out and call for a sedan chair, perhaps a rickshaw to the Peak Tram. People were going down to Central, they'd get a rickshaw to the Peak Tram.
Everybody had a washarmer in those days because a washarmer really earned her keep, and she used to wash and iron a white linen suit for my husband every day of his life. And he used to drive to the office wearing a sort of red handkerchief round his head, looking like a pirate, to stop the sweat from dripping in his eyes so much that he couldn't see where he was going. So you can imagine how uncomfortable it was.
In the cathedral there were punkahs to keep the air moving. I did hear a story of ice being shipped down from the north, and people would put a fan behind a block of ice to blow cool air into the room.
The biggest addition to quality of life really was the introduction of air conditioning. It was just marvellous when it started. And we were one of the first to have air conditioning because our house was a very hot flat, I have to say. And we had this air conditioning in the bedroom, and it was an enormous great thing, like a great big cabinet, and it made a huge noise, rattled, the whole house used to shake with this air conditioning, but it was so wonderful to have it. And when we had dinner parties, we used to invite our guests in to have their coffee, and we all used to sit on the bed and enjoy the air conditioning.
Well, Hong Kong is home. I was born here, and my life has mostly been here. We're planning on staying on. Although I must say that until the war, no one, Chinese, Westerners, regarded Hong Kong as home. We as children were always taught to think of England as home, and we used to go on home leave. And it was after the war that people began to identify with Hong Kong as home.
Well, Hong Kong now shows a very different face. Look at these contrasts. 98% of the territory's population is Chinese. Of the world's 100 leading banks, 85 have offices here, and it's the world's third largest financial center. Today's expats here are totally international, and that includes the Chinese. Well, sentiment and business apart, where does that leave Britain in Hong Kong's future? So for a start, there's the need to wipe away a series of guilt feelings that Hong Kong, a territory governed by democratic principles, is being handed back to a country that doesn't believe in them, that Britain was less than generous over the passport issue, and that we left democratic reform far too late. Above all, there's the obligation to see that China keeps to its promise to allow Hong Kong to keep its own way of life for 50 years. Brian Hanrahan reports.
Hong Kong demonstrators are a policeman's dream. Despite the force of their feelings, the protesters are polite, well-marshalled, and clean up afterwards. And for their annual demonstration against the Tiananmen massacre, they marched to the headquarters of the Chinese news agency to save the Chinese the trouble of sending out photographers. This year they can laugh at the idea of intimidation, but next year the organizers fear courage will start to ebb away.
There are more and more people will come out before 1997, especially this event, because they are afraid that after the return of sovereignty, they will have no opportunity to join this kind of a demonstration.
Britain's impressions of Hong Kong after the handover will be recorded by its senior diplomat, Hugh Davis. But although he has the right to complain to China about breaches of civil liberties,
he cautions there's not much Britain can do about it.
We don't have the same influence, we don't have the same power that we have from the 1st of July, that is quite clear. So we will be falling back onto the normal diplomatic weapons at our disposal. But I don't think I want to overestimate our chances of influencing the Chinese. We will do what we can, as firmly as we can. People say, for example, that limitations on freedom of assembly, freedom of information might put in doubt their businessman's interest in doing business here, then that sort of thing will have some effect. It's not going to have an immediate effect. It's part and parcel of an ongoing system of persuasion.
And who do you think they'll listen to most?
The United States, and that is quite clear. The United States is the dominant power, both globally and certainly regionally, and the United States has massive investments and business interests both in Hong Kong and in China.
Hong Kong newspapers are already discovering the cost of challenging China. Apple Daily, one of the few to question China's intentions, is finding that its advertising is being squeezed. China has been swift to establish a link between profits and free speech. It'll be up to its main trading partners in Europe and America to show if the link works both ways. This year, the candlelight vigil to commemorate the Tiananmen massacre was unusually well attended. It's a natural moment for Queenie Wong of Apple Daily to interview Han Dongfang, a Chinese dissident who was arrested after the June the 4th crackdown. He challenges the Chinese government. She wonders how long such outspokenness will be tolerated.
You cannot talk about June 4th in China, and now Hong Kong becomes part of China. Can we talk about this openly? Can we still have this sort of open demonstration in Hong Kong? They have to think about it.
Discovering the limits of Chinese tolerance is likely to be a lengthy business, especially as there may be considerable differences among the Chinese leaders themselves. But nothing is going to happen unless the hardcore activists can count on continued mass support. And that's because no amount of international cajoling will sway Hong Kong's new rulers unless there is a clear and continued determination from the Hong Kong population for civil liberties. It's their fight, and they have to lead it.
Let's go back to Beijing and catch up with Humphrey Hawksley. Humphrey, surely the significance of the Chinese is this really matters politically to the Chinese leadership to be seeing their getting back Hong Kong.
Well, that's right. There is a huge psychological effect here on the government and the normal people in this country about getting back Hong Kong. This has been a momentous historical year from them. The death of Deng Xiaoping, the paramount leader, in February, the return of Hong Kong, and then a few months from now they've got the equivalent of a cabinet reshuffle which will set the course for China for the next 5 years.
It's jolly convenient for them, really, isn't it? After all, Deng Xiaoping made it possible. He did the negotiations, and the new leadership, Jiang Zemin and so on, they're the ones who will get political benefit from being seen to be there, getting Hong Kong back. It's terrifically important from that point of view, isn't it?
It is terrifically important, but in a way this is China's coming of age, because they can no longer blame colonial misdeeds on anything that happens to China. That's finished now. And what they've got to do is to set a course forward which will meet the aspirations of, say, the growing middle class, the business community, and the peasants who have become poorer, a lot of them, because of economic reform, and set that course forward over the next 10 or 15 years. That's the real challenge that's facing them.
Humphrey Hawksley, we'll see, everybody will see and watch how they face up to that. Well, those are some of the turmoil of emotions that are swirling around this whole ceremony, all the events that we're about to see. So let's now go over to Eric Robson at East Tamar.
As the leaders and representatives of almost 50 countries gather to mark this farewell on a waterfront in Hong Kong, together with many of the British politicians. So closely involved with the negotiations that have led us to this moment. It's perhaps the time to remember the way that the perception of Hong Kong has changed in a century and a half. To most of us, it never seems to have looked any different, a towering shimmer of commercial success. But you have to remember it began with so few aspirations. There's Robin Cook, Foreign Secretary, arriving through the rain. One wonders, how could Captain Edward Belcher of Her Majesty's ship Sulphur have conceived of such a place or such a gathering when he raised the British flag at 8:15 on the morning of the 26th of January 1841. Watching this assembly of international goodwill as we await the arrival of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, I presume that the old colonial treasurer, Robert Montgomery Martin, would wish to change his judgment, that the hills of Hong Kong assume a greenish hue as a decayed Stilton cheese, and there does not appear the slightest possibility under any circumstances that Hong Kong will ever become a place of trade. He obviously wrote it on a wet day like this. On ancient maps would appear the legend, "Here be dragons." In any part of the world that was a mystery, from Cornwall to the Americas and to China. The difference in China was that here the dragons were real. From the Dragon Emperor to the Dragon Hills of Kowloon, just across the fragrant harbour of Hong Kong. The Ha Hon Hung Sport Association bring us the innovating Dragon Dance. In Chinese mythology, these dragons control rain and flood. No comment. They control the slow turn of the farming year. Each hill is a dragon's home, where the vital spirit of the dragon soul resides. And lest you think that we're seeing a performance given in honor of a long-gone Chinese dynasty, the dragon is a potent symbol now, as it was in the age of the Celestial Empire. It isn't so long ago that when they were building a luxury harborside hotel here, the architects included a multi-story glass wall in the frontage to avoid inconveniencing the neighborhood's dragon. The spirit of the dragon could still dive through the window for its morning swim. This is a colourful curtain raiser to a programme of entertainment and sombre ceremonial that will bring together the cultures of Britain and China in Hong Kong. And as they dance on, the rain teems from the peak. From the guns of the frigate Chatham, lying alongside at Tamar, comes a 21-gun royal salute to signal the arrival of Prince Charles. His car drives past the towering Prince of Wales barracks. For 5 and a bit hours more, still the official headquarters of British forces in Hong Kong. Prince Charles's last visit to Hong Kong was in 1994, when the community here was feeling at its most nervous about the prospects of the handover to China. He'd come to mark the end of the Gurkha regiment presence here. But on that occasion, the headlines in the local newspapers were more to do with his story that once a Gurkha officer invited him to eat snake in the officers' mess. He drives past the assembled crowd of some 10,000, gathered here in an arena reclaimed from the old naval dockyard that once served the sleek cruisers of the Royal Navy's China Squadron. The dragon dancers form their fearsome guard of honor. As Chatham echoes round the harbour, the sound bouncing back from the frontages of Kowloon across the bay. As Prince Charles gets out of the car, we hear Turner's fanfare, the Prince of Wales, performed by trumpeters from the Royal Marines, Scots Guards and the Highland Band of the Scottish Division. The Dragons will now retreat to their hillsides as our programme of farewell prepares to celebrate the spirit of Hong Kong. And no one can doubt the power of that spirit. For a century and a half, the fortunes of this place have ebbed and flowed, mainly flowed. But even during the bad times, there's been a will to overcome here that's seen off many a threat by its sheer bloody-mindedness, its self-belief in what could be achieved on a barren rock at the mouth of the Pearl River. And it's the beat of drum, the universal beat of drum, that calls the people of Hong Kong to reiterate that self-confidence. Drums uncovered, the beat begins. Drummers from the Hong Kong International School, from the Wang Kwong Chinese Orchestra, from the Island Sun Drum, and from the drum school of Mr. Yim Ho Man. As the pre-recorded theme from the Chinese orchestra breaks out across the arena, it's too wet at the moment for the orchestra itself to play. We reflect that Hong Kong is a place of the sea. Its people and its trade came by sea to this pattern of islands. Dancers from the Academy of Performing Arts and local ballet companies pay tribute to the lifeblood of Hong Kong, the estuaries and ocean currents that have brought wealth to the Hong Kong shore. Inlets and bays, the eddies and currents of the South China Sea. The sailing junk was the workhorse of the Hong Kong trade. There are very few to be seen now except the ones converted to pleasure craft. Any working junk moving through the harbour amongst the container ships and bulk carriers will be old and decrepit and in the coastal trade. But their legacy is remembered. A reminder of the old and sustained values, the preeminent place of age and wisdom, even in this brash conurbation. The practice of Tai Chi, the great infinitive, the source of all life, the most noble of all the martial arts. Harnessing the opposing forces of yin and yang that run deep to the spiritual roots of Hong Kong. The power of place and identity is in the faces, even faces streaked by torrential rain. The Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra swells to another message from Hong Kong. An image of Hong Kong that's reflected to the world from its walls of glass, dynamic, hedonistic, but powerfully self-contained. Education has always been a priority here, from the days when Chinese students would travel to England and spend 10 years at their studies. Now they have fine universities here. The world of Happy Valley with the island's passion for the horse race. A passion too for shopping. What was it Governor Patton was saying earlier today? That he quite enjoyed what he described as retail therapy. The elements of Hong Kong gather. And of course, it's money that's still the lubricant of Hong Kong society. A dynamic stock exchange, an investment in world-class electronics and manufacture. And of course, Hong Kong is a society that clock watches, that spends, that earns, and that watch is not a fake. The microchip and the rule of law, the maintenance of which has caused such concern as the Chinese takeover loomed closer. And wild applause from this crowd of 10,000 people, despite the fact that so many hands are occupied with keeping umbrellas above the head. And as the symbols of modern Hong Kong leave centre stage, I'm reminded that they used to say of this place that the colony was run by the Jockey Club, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, and the governor, in that order, of course. I wonder if Governor Patton would agree. Certainly it's always been the most maverick of colonies, where the word colony virtually disappeared from the lexicon. This dot on the edge of China, 1/9,000th the size of its host, that at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office became, as one previous governor put it, a perpetual exception to everything. We're now introduced to our narrators for the evening, the Hong Kong-born international entertainer Francis Yip and the actor Brian Blessed.
This is a day for saying farewell.
But it's also a day of celebration.
Celebration of the spirit of Hong Kong.
A day to rejoice in friendships made.
And a day to look forward in hope and expectation.
A huddle of islands and inlets where the mountains of China embrace the sea. Hong Kong has been a place of meeting and a place of refuge.
Here merchants and teachers, architects and artisans have built one of the world's greatest cities.
Here, East and West have joined together in free and peaceful partnership.
We are gathered now in this place, between the mountains and the sea, with the eyes of the world upon us, and standing all about us, great buildings that declare Hong Kong's vigor and achievement.
As we think of the wonders of this city, let us welcome those for whom it is held in trust, the children who will inherit what has been built, whose hopes and dreams and talents will chart new courses, create new wonders. 環顧今日香港非常輝煌嘅成就，有賴上一代耕耘呢一代嘅努力，寄望亦都深信下一代會用佢哋嘅才華同埋幹勁，使香港再創新猷。而家歡迎香港未來嘅主人翁，我哋嘅兒童。
To the stage have come the Hong Kong Children's Choir, conducted by Kathy Fock. Known as the Little Goodwill Singing Ambassadors from Hong Kong, they now sing All the Children of the World. Sammy Chan, Kit Ting Che and Rainbow Lung present a bouquet to Mrs. Patton. a wonderful performance in adversity. And let's hope that they remember today for more than the rain running down their neck. Wonderful and wonderfully appreciated. The innocence of childhood as a counterpoint to the memories shared by the tens of thousands of people who've flown in recent days to share these last hours of the old Hong Kong.
This is a city of contrasts. Contrasts of wealth, of language, and of culture. Here the world's most crowded streets thrive beside quiet green hills.
This is a city where contrast creates excitement. Here, East has met West in a spirit of adventure. Variety of viewpoint and knowledge has enlivened old truths, sparked new ideas.
Different peoples have worked hard together to build their lives here. But amid all their labors, time has been found for music and leisure. Canto pop and Western rock have pulsed with the rhythm of the city.
While the melodies of China and Europe, the songs of every land, have enlivened our festivities, dignified our celebrations, given rest and reflection amid the rumble of life. 各行各業喺香港工作之際不忘娛樂，各種音樂都有機會喺香港流行起嚟，而且中外名曲更加點綴我哋各式嘅慶典，令到我哋緊張嘅生活平添怡情同埋休憩。
The sound of China, the Hong Kong Chinese Orchestra, conducted by Yan Wei Chang. Instruments protected from the rain as much as possible by umbrellas, will now play The General's Command, a piece which depicts the jubilant welcome of a victorious general on his return. Well done for performing in such appalling weather conditions. But the orchestra is joined now by international tenor Warren Mock, who elaborates on the theme of Hong Kong's dependence on the currents of the South China Sea. The sea, my home. Umbrellas have to be rearranged to protect another batch of instruments. I think that the wind has turned the rain slightly to the west. When I was young, Mother told me that the ocean is my homeland, born near the sea, grown up near the sea. The sea breeze is blowing, the waves are surging. This is an evening of two cultures overlapping. It's the turn now of the Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by David Atherton, as they accompany Dame Gwyneth Jones in memory. As the hour draws closer, memories, poignant and sometimes painful, flood in, but also the fresh beginnings of a new day. As the lights of Hong Kong blossom and reflect from tower and tide, Dame Gwyneth Jones now sings The Last Rose of Summer.
All her love
Dame Gwyneth is now joined by Warren Mock to sing to the theme that will be close to the heart of many here tonight, about to love and leave their fondly remembered Hong Kong. I'll see you again. A sigh of lingering goodbye for those who are leaving Hong Kong, but the hope too that memories and the reality of Hong Kong's new world will coincide, that this place with so many assets, so many advantages, will be allowed to fulfill its potential.
1.5 centuries ago, Hong Kong's second governor predicted that the capabilities of this place will altogether surpass expectation. The prospect of commerce, the finest harbour in the world, and a free port must render it in time a great entrepot.
50 years on, Governor Sir William Robinson wrote, "The Solemn Basin has become a harbour covered with shipping, a sight hardly to be matched in the whole world."
Even after the waste and ruin of the last war, the first editorial of a new journal proclaimed, "The importance of Hong Kong transcends the mere financial and commercial sphere. It is an international meeting place of the first order, a civilization exchange between West and East."
香港最後一位港督認為香港備受福蔭，成為平等就業體制嘅成功典範。我哋而家有請港督致告別詞。The last British governor has said that he finds Hong Kong today a blazing beacon of good fortune, a dazzling example of what free men and women, putting adversity and hardship behind them, can together achieve. We now invite him to make his farewell to the city that he has served.
Your Royal Highness, Prime Minister, distinguished guests, people of Hong Kong. For Hong Kong as a whole, today is cause for celebration, not sorrow.
But here and there, perhaps there will be a touch of personal sadness, as is true of any departure, a point to which I shall return. History is not just a matter of dates. What makes history is what comes before and what comes after the dates that we all remember. The story of this great city is about the years before this night and the years of success that will surely follow it. Of course, Hong Kong's story is not solely that of the century and a half of British responsibility, though it is the conclusion of that chapter that we mark tonight. This chapter began with events that, from today's vantage point, at the end of the following century, none of us here would wish or seek to condone. But we might note that most of those who live in Hong Kong now do so because of events in our own century which would today have few defenders. All that is a reminder that sometimes we should remember the past, the better to forget it. What we celebrate this evening is the restless energy, the hard work, the audacity of the men and women who have written Hong Kong's success story. Mostly Chinese men and Chinese women. They were only ordinary in the sense that most of them came here with nothing. They are extraordinary in what they have achieved against the odds. As British administration ends, we are, I believe, entitled to say that our own nation's contribution here was to provide the scaffolding that enabled the people of Hong Kong to ascend. The rule of law, clean and light-handed government, the values of a free society, the beginnings of representative government and democratic accountability. This is a Chinese city, a very Chinese city with British characteristics. No dependent territory has been left more prosperous. None with such a rich texture and fabric of civil society, professions, churches, newspapers, charities, civil servants of the highest probity and the most steadfast commitment to the public good. I have no doubt that with people here holding on to these values which they cherish, Hong Kong's star will continue to climb. Hong Kong's values are decent values. They are universal values. They are the values of the future in Asia as elsewhere. A future in which the happiest and the richest communities, and the most confident and most stable too, will be those that best combine political liberty and economic freedom as we do here today. All of us here tonight, and I am sure all my fellow countrymen and women watching these events from afar, wish the Chief Executive of the Special Administrative Region and his excellent team the very best of luck as they embark on their journey. C.H. Tung and his wife Betty will serve Hong Kong with dedication, strength, and enthusiasm. Everyone here, and people outside Hong Kong as well, will be willing them to succeed in the challenging years that lie ahead. I said that tonight's celebration will be tinged for some with sadness. So it will be for my family and myself, and for others who, like us, will soon depart from this shore. I am the 28th governor, the last governor. Like all the other governors and their families, my wife, my children, and myself will take Hong Kong home in our hearts. You have been kind to us. You have made us welcome. It has been the greatest honor and privilege of my life to share your home for 5 years and to have some responsibility for your future. Now, Hong Kong people are to run Hong Kong. That is the promise, and that is the unshakable destiny.
A typically blunt, buoyant and from-the-shoulder message by the 28th and final British governor of Hong Kong. Applause swells round this great arena. A demonstration, if any was needed, of the affection in which Chris Patton is held in this place. Mr. Patton, aware that his actions and words have in a way set the last seal on the reputation of empire. Simply creeping out of Hong Kong and leaving the key under the mat, as one diplomat suggested, slightly tongue-in-cheek during the worst period of gridlock in the talks with China, would have been awfully bad form. Not at all in the spirit of Elgar's Nimrod, played now by the Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by David Atherton. power, decency and responsibility underlined.
Music, in its myriad sounds, is part of life in Hong Kong. More often than the stately music of Elgar are heard the drums of dragon boats and the clangor of lion dances.
But the double, double, double beat of the thundering drum may also mark a passing band, passing on parade, exhorting us all to lift our heads, walk in step, and raise our spirits.
March bands, by the sector! Quick march!
Out of the gathering darkness come the massed military bands, bound by the Royal Marines, the Scots Guards, and the Highland Band of the Scottish Division. They march on to Kenneth Alford's Great Little Army and the British Grenadiers. Led by the senior drum major, Scots Guards, Robert Young. They now play the Standard of St George, again by Kenneth Alford, who was Director of Music to the Plymouth Division of the Royal Marines when he wrote this in 1930. The Slow March Morning from the Peer Gynt Suite by Grieg, arranged by the Principal Director of Music, Guards Division, Lieutenant Colonel David Price. comprises members of the Royal Yacht Band and of the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines, Plymouth. And the march in quick time to Dvorak's New World. As the massed bands march away, the strains of the massed pipes and drums, plaintive yet stirring, come to us across this most unusual of parade squares. They march on to Scotland the Brave and far o'er the sea. The pipes and drums found by the Black Watch and the Royal Gurkha Regiment now play the Glasgow City Police Pipers. The pipes and drums now rejoined by the massed bands to the air, Lass of Ivy, and then from Beethoven's Ninth, Ode to Joy. Ode to Joy, conducted by Lieutenant Colonel David Price, Scots Guards. We'll now see the marching on of the Guard. To their official march past Heart of Oak by William Boyce come the Royal Navy. A detachment found by HMS Chatham, lying alongside at Tamar, and also from HMS Illustrious. The Guard Commander, Lieutenant Commander Jim Reed, working with the UK Armilla Task Group in the Gulf. The eyes right. The salute taken. The colour on parade, that of the Fleet Air Arm, borne by Lieutenant Nick Doyle of the Hong Kong Squadron. Welcomes to great approval from the assembled crowds here the Army Guard, found by the Black Watch, under the command of Major Richard Cole Mackintosh. They carry two colours, the Queen's colour and the regimental colour, presented in September last year by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. These two colours between them list many of the regiment's 168 battle honours. RAF march past as the Queen's Colour Squadron of the RAF Regiment takes the square, led by Guard Commander, Squadron Leader Mike Stewart from Stirling. Carrying the RAF colour, Flight Lieutenant Andy Finch. The colours carried here, of course, a reminder of their honoured practical role in time of battle, when they would be paraded before the troops and when they would mark the regimental position in the line or engagement. Colour of the Royal Air Force moves to position. The parade commander is Lieutenant Commander Alistair Loudon, Black Watch, in command of the 1st Battalion since 1995. His children are at home watching this parade on television in Inverness. They form two ranks and then inwards dress. Dressing complete, Lieutenant Commander Loudon will order eyes front, slope arms, parade royal salute and present arms. The colours lowered in royal salute. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, will now read a message from Her Majesty, the Queen.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Governor, Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked by Her Majesty the Queen to read the following message. 5 hours from now, the Union flag will be lowered and the flag of China will fly over Hong Kong. More than a century and a half of British administration will come to an end. During that time, Hong Kong has grown from a small coastal settlement into one of the leading cities and one of the greatest trading economies in the world. There have been times of sacrifice, suffering, and courage. As Hong Kong has risen from the ashes of war, a most dramatic transformation has taken place. Millions of destitute immigrants have been absorbed, and Hong Kong has created one of the most successful societies on earth. Britain is both proud and privileged to have been involved with this success story. Proud of the British values and institutions that have been the framework for Hong Kong's success. Proud of the rights and freedoms which Hong Kong people enjoy. Privileged to have been associated with the prodigiously talented and resourceful people of Hong Kong who have built upon that foundation. The British flag will be lowered and British administrative responsibility will end. But Britain is not saying goodbye to Hong Kong. More than 3.5 million Hong Kong residents are British nationals. Thousands of young Hong Kong men and women study in Britain every year. We share language and the English common law. And thousands of Britons, too, have made their homes in Hong Kong. The shared legacy of family and of friendship, trade and investment, culture and history run strong and deep. Britain is part of Hong Kong's history, and Hong Kong is part of Britain's history. We are also part of each other's future. We are confident that the ties between us will not only endure, but will continue to develop. In a shrinking world, Hong Kong's role as Europe's gateway to Asia and Britain's role as Asia's gateway to Europe will reinforce the bonds between our two societies. For all these reasons, my government and I will continue to take the closest interest in Hong Kong and in its development. The British Consulate General, which will be inaugurated in a few hours' time, will be our largest in the world. The Sino-British Joint Liaison Group will continue for another 2.5 years to discuss matters concerning the implementation of the Sino-British Joint Declaration. That joint declaration itself remains in force for 50 years. For many years to come, the Hong Kong connection will command our attention. Hong Kong now faces its transition to Chinese sovereignty in excellent condition, prosperous, stable, and dynamic. Unprecedented though this moment in history may be, we have the utmost confidence in the abilities and resilience of the Hong Kong people. Britain learnt long ago that Hong Kong people know best what is good for Hong Kong. We have no doubt that Hong Kong people can run Hong Kong, as the Joint Declaration promises, and that faithful implementation of the Joint Declaration is the key to Hong Kong's continued success. The eyes of the world are on Hong Kong today. I wish you all a successful transition and a prosperous and peaceful future.
Despite the rain pounding from the peak, a cheer for His Royal Highness having delivered his message from Her Majesty the Queen.
The army
The command for the Army Guard to open. A Central Army contingent reforming, opening the guard as the military ceremony approaches its solemn conclusion, focusing attention of the parade on the flagpoles high above the arena on the harbour side, where fly the Union and Hong Kong flags. These men on parade representing the hundreds of thousands who've served in Hong Kong in the last century and a half. Water streaming across the Tamar parade ground as the massed bands play The Day Thou Gavest. When the flags are lowered, it will be the Royal Navy that will lower the Union flag, because their involvement with Hong Kong has been the longest. The Hong Kong flag will be lowered by the Royal Hong Kong Police. A moment of reflection as we prepare to close a volume of history. The defining moment, as Pipe Major Stephen Small marches forward to play Immortal Memory, the lament for those who gave their lives for us. 5 beats of drum order the parade to move from present arms to the high port, and the volley foi de jeu. The guard found by the Black Watch now reforms. The soldiers, soaked in this downpour, will return to the Prince of Wales barracks, change into the one remaining set of clothes they have, and fly from Hong Kong in a few hours.
Army Guard, right, dress!
To the parade commander, the 41-year-old Lieutenant Commander Alistair Loudon, falls the task of giving the last command on parade to British troops in Hong Kong. A slow march into a new order. As the guards march away, the crowd begins to sing, joining in the theme of Auld Lang Syne, as these men march away from their final Hong Kong posting. Cheers the parade ground around as the massed bands march off to valiant years. The bands deploy the pipes and drums to take their positions for the finale of this British farewell. The pipes and drums, the Hong Kong orchestras and Hong Kong Children's Choir are joined now by choristers from the Diocesan Boys' School, the Cilician Singers, the Hong Kong Bach Choir and the Hong Kong Philharmonic Chorus, as Brian Blessed and Francis Yip draw this evening of farewell to a close. Prince Charles and the other VIPs soaked to the skin, and they still have to go on to the formal handover ceremony at the convention centre just along the quay.
The sun sets, the order of the world changes, but the light of friendship and the warmth of memory remain.
Britain has been honored to have been part of the history of Hong Kong and to have shared in building the great free city that we see around us.
Hong Kong has been happy in our partnership. The past holds sorrows and yet has been full of joys. We will remember and be glad. We will remain as friends.
Time moves on, but the strength of our affection will not change. And we know that with the courage that brought success in the past, with the confidence that success has earned, everything is possible.
時光流逝，世事不斷轉變，但係有如浩瀚碧波，巍巍大山。過去嘅友誼經得起考驗，未來嘅友誼今日邁出第一步。
This city has a sure foundation. The years turn, our lives change. But there is something as firm as the mountains, as ceaseless as the seas. The friendship that endures. The friendship of the future, now begun.
Future friendship, accompanied by the Hong Kong Philharmonic Orchestra, who play Rhythm of My Heart, as the young people of Hong Kong dance in honour of the spirit of this vibrant place. Kong lives. And there are tears in many eyes. Tonight, Governor Chris Patton described Hong Kong as a Chinese success story with British characteristics. It's a phrase that chimes well with the spirit of this goodbye. China is certainly jubilant about the return of this 412 square miles of territory, and that jubilation is everywhere in Hong Kong. As Prince Charles drives away to the more formal banquet and the official handover ceremony at midnight, he'll see all around him, in lights, messages welcoming the new Chinese rule. There are flags of the special administrative region everywhere. But as we've seen tonight, it isn't quite as simple as that. There's a genuine fondness for Britain's decent contribution here. Genuine fondness for the last governor too. He's family, as one Chinese Hong Konger described it to me. The international representatives who've obviously thoroughly enjoyed their entertainment here at Tamar will probably have to look more sombre as the night's proceedings unfold along the waterfront at the convention centre. But for the time being at least, they smile. They've seen in the eyes of the children here that fondness for China and fondness for Britain are not necessarily mutually exclusive.
So Britain has said farewell. The flags have been lowered in Hong Kong weather and very Chinese weather and British weather too. The 156-year-long British presence is all but over. At almost 8 o'clock in the evening here, the political presence has some 4 hours to run. 100 years ago, the British Chancellor of the Exchequer said that European powers should not try to grab Chinese territory. Relations with China, he insisted, should be about trade. A century on, that is the position to which Britain, China and Hong Kong are returning. So join us in 3 hours' time. That's 4 o'clock in London, 11 p.m. here in Hong Kong for the final handover ceremony, live here on BBC One. For now, for the time being, it's goodbye from Hong Kong.